30 years after his passing, beloved actor Fred Gwynne remains best known for playing the lovable monster Herman Munster. But behind the Frankenstein makeup was a talented performer with a complex story. Now Gwynne's daughter, Madyn, pulls back the curtain on the man versus the myth. Join Factsverse as we rediscover the multidimensional artist behind Herman Munster and re-examine the life of a television legend. The early years. Fred Gwynne was born Frederick Hubbard Gwynne, July 10, 1926, in New York City, into a family that had a rich history in the arts. His father was a successful stockbroker, while his mother was an artist. Growing up in the affluent neighborhood of Tuxedo Park, New York, Fred was exposed to a life of privilege, but he never let that define him. From a young age, he showed an inclination towards the arts. He attended the prestigious Groton School in Massachusetts, where he was active in the drama club. At 6'5", he made a distinctive presence, both on stage and off. But it wasn't just his height that stood out. It was his undeniable talent and charisma. Teachers and peers recognized Fred had a gift. His talents weren't confined to acting either. He was an avid painter and showed a keen interest in drawing. In fact, before his foray into acting, he studied portrait painting at the Phoenix School of Design in New York. He even considered making art his career, a path that later served him well in understanding the nuances of character development in his acting roles. The outbreak of World War II interrupted his artistic pursuits. Fred enlisted in the U.S. Navy and served as a radio man on a submarine chasing ship. This period was transformative for him, instilling a sense of discipline and responsibility that would be evident in his later professional choices. After the war, he returned to his studies, this time at Harvard. Here, he became a member of the famed Hasty Pudding Club, a theatrical society that further honed his skills. Breakout success. After graduating in 1951, he started his acting career on stage. His deep baritone voice and imposing 6'5" stature lent themselves well to Shakespearean parts and comedic roles. He made his Broadway debut in 1952 as a gangster in Mrs. McThing, starring legendary actress Helen Hayes, who had discovered him at Harvard. Over the next decade, he began building his reputation while also breaking into television. He landed parts on early anthology series like The United States Steel Hour and Kraft Theater. His ability to deliver laughs led to guest appearances on The Phil Silvers Show, where his eating contest scene became an instant classic. His big break came when he was cast as Officer Francis Muldoon on the sitcom Car 54, Where Are You? The series followed the misadventures of Muldoon and dim-witted partner Officer Tootie, played by Joey Ross. Set in the Bronx, it used New York City as its comedic backdrop. While only airing 2 seasons from 1961 to 63, Car 54 was a critical success, earning 4 Emmy nominations, including Outstanding Directorial Achievement in Comedy. Despite this achievement, Gwynne felt constrained in the lighthearted cop role. With his imposing frame and unconventional looks, he struggled to land versatile parts. So when Stephen Z. Bromberg approached him about starring as Herman Munster in a new sitcom, The Munsters, Gwynne reluctantly agreed. Premiering on CBS in '64, The Munsters blended the universal monster movie archetypes of the 30s and 40s with sitcom suburban family ideals. Gwynne's Herman was the Frankenstein's monster patriarch, paired with Yvonne de Carlo's vampire housewife Lily. While the show only lasted 2 seasons, it was a pop culture phenomenon. But for Gwynne, getting into the heavy monster makeup and costume every day was exhaustive, and being immortalized as the bumbling Herman was creatively stifling. Life after The Munsters. When The Munsters was canceled in 1966, Gwynne found himself indelibly associated with the Herman Munster character. Despite his stage pedigree and dramatic training, Hollywood directors and producers struggled to see him as anything else. He returned to the theater, winning an Obie Award for his off-Broadway performance in Grand Magic in 1979. His most acclaimed part was starring as Big Daddy in the 1974 Broadway revival of Tennessee Williams' classic Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. Critics praised his powerful yet nuanced take on the Southern patriarch role. Though he had resisted being typecast, financial pressures led Gwynne to reprise his role as Herman Munster for the 1981 TV movie The Munsters' Revenge. He only agreed after demanding an exorbitant salary, which the network surprisingly acquiesced to. In the 80s, he began to rebuild his acting career with roles in Francis Ford Coppola's The Cotton Club alongside Richard Gere and Diane Lane, and the Oscar-nominated Ironweed with Jack Nicholson and Meryl Streep. Horror fans appreciated his chilling turn as Judd Crandall in the adaptation of Stephen King's Pet Sematary. But it was his comedic talent that shined through again when he was cast as Judge Chamberlain Holler in the 1992 hit My Cousin Vinny, opposite Joe Pesci and Marissa Tomei. His exasperated back and forth with Pesci's character showed Gwynne's knack for timing and deadpan delivery. Critics singled out his performance as a highlight of the film. Remembering Fred Gwynne. Though he passed away from pancreatic cancer in 1993 at age 66, Fred Gwynne remains beloved by legions of fans for his memorable on-screen characters. But according to his daughter Madyn, her father was so much more than just Herman Munster. Gwynne was a gifted artist first and foremost, she says, talented at illustration, painting, sculpting, and writing. Friends recall his sharp intellect and wicked sense of humor that could liven up any room. He loved clever wordplay and was always scribbling down ideas for stories or drawing caricatures of friends. But Gwynne also struggled privately with depression and feelings of isolation throughout his life and career. Despite wide-ranging talents, he found himself typecast after playing Francis Muldoon on Car 54, and especially as Herman Munster. He resented being reduced to a two-dimensional caricature in the public eye. Personal tragedies painfully widened the gap between his public persona and private self. Gwynne's problems became more difficult as a result of the drowning death of one of his young sons and the illness that left another son permanently disabled. Few knew of his deep grief. According to biographer Stephen Cox, Gwynne's reluctance to discuss his Munsters days later in life likely stemmed from wanting to avoid revisiting this period of intense professional success shadowed by profound personal loss. He deliberately retreated from Hollywood to focus on his art and family. Late in his career, Gwynne had remarried and found peace living anonymously on a rural Maryland farm, painting, writing children's books, and occasionally acting. He remains misunderstood, says his daughter, because his biography became oversimplified into the highs of fame and lows of typecasting. The depth of Gwynne's talent is evident when looking back at his Shakespearean training, Harvard artistic pedigree, and range of stage roles. But ironically, the stereotyped Frankenstein and Herman Munster characters he chafed at playing gave him an immortal pop culture legacy. Now it's time to hear from you. Were you surprised to learn about Fred Gwynne's upper-class upbringing and Harvard education? Let us know in the comments section below.